guys. Thank you so for that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I put this high. For that very inspiring presentation. I just love how everything starts with graduation, and I think that is what this is all about. Yeah. Thank you. So Sue and I have been working on a number of things. And the big one is the Operation Student Success, which DVC launched about 2 years ago. It was a process that started with the DVC saying that we need to design a retention and success strategy. And the question was, from what, right? So the question was really, do we even understand what's happening in our institution around success, around attrition, completion? So the most part of 2 years was actually spent doing research. Through that research, I developed this love of quantitative data, so it was the first time in this institution that we had done cohort studies of this nature, where we follow a student from entry all the way through. We track the students' movements in a very literal way. We account for students stopping out, coming back, dropping out. We also drilled down to the level of modules to see where it is that students struggle and when these struggles cause dropout, what kinds of struggles cause delayed completion. So it was a very comprehensive study, many components. We also did quite a big literature review. We had some support from the DVC, some funds to get people to assist. The value of the literature review is that it brought together, like most of the research that had ever been done on this campus, on student success, on just students in classrooms, student experience, and it was just fascinating to draw that together, to see these areas of synergy across years of study, and to have that inform a retention study. We also took to SAP only one actual report on the data was when we were asked at SEC to look at maths and maths literacy, and students entering with maths and maths literacy and the impact on student success, and that was a fascinating study that taught us a lot. And that's where we needed to start. And part of the cohort study was we were then able to profile our students in very, very clear ways, who they were, where they were coming from, where they were living, were they in residences, and we supplemented these things also with questionnaires during registration, focus group discussions. I must also acknowledge my own Mellon Foundation group. I have 50 students who have been through a 10-year cohort with me from third year to PhD, and that group was also very important in the discussions around student success and completion and the factors that impact their and other students' journeys. So it's been a process that has now come to the point where we are able to put all of this together and for a moment just stop talking about the data, but have it in the background to inform a framework or a strategy for retention and student success. And I always start these presentations, I've done a lot of them here on the campus, was just reminding us about where we are. And the higher education system in South Africa, reminding us that nationally the system is one of low participation, let's not forget that. High attrition and low completion. Substantial racial disparities exist in the system. Very small proportions of African, colored and Indian students participate in university and graduate in regulation time. By the end of regulation time, more students have been lost to failure and dropout than have graduated. So that was an astounding detail for me, that by the time we reached on-time graduation, we have lost more students than are still in the system. First year attrition is high nationally at around 33%. It's a bit lower at UWC, and there are racial disparities with first year attrition as well. A study conducted by the CAG some years ago showed very high overall attrition for undergrad students and found that after 5 years of study in a 3-year program, 55% of enrolled students would have been lost to the system. So this data shows that, you know, these low completion and high attrition rates are hugely inefficient, and they come at significant loss and significant cost to universities and students. And I love this quote by Nico Kluter, who describes this as a lose-lose situation for poor students who drop out and find themselves being revolved back into poverty with the added burden of student debt that they cannot repay because they lack the qualifications to secure formal employment. And this is the thing that, you know, for me drives our retention strategy and student success. And the flip side of this coin that Nico Kluter has described as being revolved back into poverty is that we also have tried to commit to closing the loop on student success by looking at employability. Because part of that flip back into where you started is about the fact that students in this country, once they've graduated, struggle to find work. And this is racially skewed again, with black, colored, and colored students facing longer periods of unemployment and having to accept jobs that are not at the level of their qualification in relation to their white peers. And there's a regional study in the Western Cape that points that out in relation to UCT, Stellenbosch, CPUT, and UWC students. And this is something that should concern us when we think about retention and success as well. So that was the context in which we undertook the study. I explained that we did the quantitative data by looking at cohort studies, and you know, our key findings, and I'm going to stop talking about the data at this point. So our key findings at UWC do not differ from what we know about the national context. Our undergraduate system experiences high attrition and low retention at UWC. Significant numbers of our students do not complete, and this varies from program to program, but we look at dropout and it ranges from around 38% to 50%. Many experience delayed completion. Our students take significantly longer than regulation time to complete, and very few students complete in regulation time. Sometimes as low as 23% through to about 35%. So these inefficiencies are really concerning. The issue of delayed completion, the issue of dropout, and also the issue of students actually being in the system for quite a long time before they drop out. Our first year, and I'll get to that, let me get to that in a moment. So when I first took this data to faculties, I asked the key question of people who came to those meetings: to what extent are there factors within our control that we can use and make a difference to student outcomes and student output? Because in this country there are a lot of factors beyond our control, but what we need to understand is what can we do something about, and that's where our retention strategy will come in. So one last comment. You can see I can't get let go of this data, but one key area that Operation Student Success highlights is student losses at UWC are characterized in very particular ways. Although most losses are at first year, right? It is a cumulative effect of loss over second, third, fourth, fifth year that brings us to that 48-50%, right? Second year is an area of extensive loss as well. And therefore our retention efforts, and this is very important, we need to be able to support students beyond the first year. And secondly, and this is related to this, students' early struggles, right, often result in dropout later down the line. So, and here we looked at our promotion codes. That was the only way we could determine early struggle. So students who, for example, received a fail in first year, were not excluded, came back, attempted second year, carrying modules from first year, there was an 84% chance of those students dropping out further down the line. And that was quite a significant percentage. And I'm using 84 and it varies across programs, but that was one of the highest indicators. So this is very important so those early struggles, we're calling them early struggles, where students experience failure. they impact dropout further down the line. So those are the kinds of background factors that guide this process. And what we've also discovered along the line, when we try to kind of talk about student success and pin it down into a strategy, because when you pin something down into a framework of strategy, you need to identify, well, what is this? What are its components? What are the factors? What does it consist of? Where can we intervene? And the striking thing is that student success is shaped by a very complex, very layered, dynamic interplay of events, circumstances, conditions that are related to the personal, the institutional, the broader contextual factors, right? And we all know in our heads, we can see that we know what those are. And so it's this that we need to be thinking about as we talk about retention and success. And there's an interesting quote that came about that I kind of played around with for a long time, where somebody said, when you think about attrition and success, or failure and success in this context, the one is not the mirror image of the other. And this is something that we really need to understand. So when we see students who are being successful, we cannot make assumptions like, if we understood those factors that allow them to be successful, it's not to say that the students who have not been successful do not possess those capabilities or factors. And there's other ways of looking at it, but it's proved constantly by a lot of the students one talks to. We cannot assume the one from the other. We cannot explain failure by talking about success. We cannot explain success by talking about the absence of failure. So we need to understand the complexity of this. And that's the thing that makes it interesting as well. So I'm going to jump now to actually talking about how this retention strategy is going to look. So I think even before I talk about the key principles, I think the strategy borrows from George Zabotsky's work, where he conceptualized, and used to be at UWC, now deceased, the student walk in a very particular way, where the student walk is such a strong image of seeing students entering your institution, but it actually traces it back to before entry, even before application phase, in terms of recruitment and marketing and the perception of the institution and who you get applying and how you accept students, how we register them, right through to their participation in a program, completion, and closing the loop with graduation and employment. And so for us, this is the student walk. And I mean, often when we think of a walk, and I think you pointed that out very clearly, we think of a very clear route. But it is my engagement with my Mellon students, they constantly talk about this metaphor of a road that isn't straight. And they've tried visually in all kinds of ways to explain this, and I'm sure you've seen these images where there's a road with all these dips and people fall out and you pull yourself up, and so it's a journey. The student walk is a journey that is definitely not a straight route, but many students enter the institution with a conceptualization that is going to be a straight road, and many of us have them sitting in front of us and we're planning for a straight journey as well. So as we think about the student walk in those ways, we thought these would be the key principles, and we're still working around these. But one that is very important is the first one, that student success must become central to the mission of the institution. A more colloquial way of saying that is student success is everybody's business, right? So when we're looking at the strategy, we're really looking at an integrated and a systemic approach. This one is also important for me, is action is as important as reflection and analysis. We do a lot of writing, we do a lot of thinking, we do a lot of talking, we try a lot of things, but not as many things as we talk about and analyze and look at data. And so action and how we facilitate that action is very important. The third one is that the student success endeavor requires mutual engagement of students and the universities. And this is critical for us because it requires us to see mutual responsibility as well for student success. Students and their needs and their risk factors. We fond of thinking about those, and those are often easier for us to see than the institutional risk factors, which we are often blind to. What in our institution creates hurdles and burdens and works against student success. So for us as a team, we're trying to translate what we know now about student success at this institution and retention into institutional action to achieve substantial improvement. For me, this is very, very important, that again the notion of closing the loop on improvement. We're putting enough interventions into place that mean to address these things. We are taking institutional action. We need to set up those actions in order to be able to evaluate the impact. I don't think it's good enough for us to say anymore that we believe this will work, we feel this will work, we have a gut feeling about that this is working for students, and we don't have the means to evaluate whether it has. The next principle is that we want to achieve a systemic and an integrated approach. We've addressed that, we're just repeating it. That is effectively implemented, managed and coordinated. And so the management of the approach, we can't leave it to pockets happening in places. Because if we do that, we fail to look at things holistically. One example of this has become very clear because out of Operation Student Success also came the need to conduct the review of the ECP programs, right? And one thing that we realized when we did that review is that there was something in there that was symbolic about the way we do things at UWC around student success. We work very hard in our spaces as lecturers with our students. We focus on our module pass rates. Sometimes as a department we focus on students doing our majors, and we feel that we have succeeded if students are passing our modules, if students are doing well in our majors. But there is nobody in our faculties, and I'm using this very generally, who takes responsibility overall for student success at the program level. And so we're trying with this to shift the thinking from we are doing wonderful things in our classroom and in our modules to, but where does the program sit? Where does it reside? Who is responsible for it? And surely we need to see that the things that we are doing impact success in the program. And I think that's where we lose it a little bit. We don't talk enough about program success. And that's become, quite a revelation. And this is going to require ongoing monitoring and evaluation of the impact of this framework and what we do around student success. People, it might sound managerialist, whenever we talk about monitoring and evaluation, we get that accusation, but we can't do this without monitoring and evaluating what we are doing. Okay, so at the moment, our framework looks something like this, right? For student retention and success. We've tried, in looking at this framework, to think about the student work. We've tried to conceptualize the times and the places that students might need help. And we've tried to identify the spaces that will provide them. And I think that's my biggest way of thinking about that. As students engage in this work, what are the times and the places that they might need help, and where are the spaces that they might get that help? So it's imagining the student. So it's an interplay of all of these things: teaching and learning, curriculum and assessment, and tracking and monitoring. So we're looking at the physical in terms of students' health, their access to healthcare, safety and security, their mental health in a very broad sense, which is about their well-being, their personal growth, their motivational level, their confidence, and also those moments when our students experience anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and need that kind of support. Student engagement, there's a big group of people on this campus already talking about student engagement. Academic support, we're often the clearest about. We often know what we need to do, and we do these things well. Our tutoring, our mentoring, the support we give students, our open doors, our consultations with students. Financial support is a very critical one. And this is one that we want to start talking about more openly, is about advising at the level of faculty. How are we advising, mentoring, guiding students? How do we interact with them as human beings, right? There are many students who will not come and consult with you. How do we encourage that? How do we offer guidance to students who are struggling in many different ways? And that's more than just helping them pick a major, decide what's their career choice, but it's about how we do all of those things. And around these kind of bubbles that I've identified here is that if I look at one of the biggest area for us is around understanding the socio-economic background of our students, right? So what does that mean? It means that financial support and just understanding our students becomes very important. Our students are commuting, right? We know the stories about commuting students. Our students don't have access to healthcare. They don't have adequate access to healthcare on the campus as well. We simply cannot provide for everyone's needs. Our students are food insecure, right? I don't know if you read the article in the newspaper last week on the conference on food security, which was held a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of research that has been done here on food insecurity on our campus. Our students' living conditions. The astounding thing with when we looked at first year students, only 8% of them were in our residences. We have no idea where the others are and how they live. And when you talk to students about how they live, just the other day a student was saying, I have a mattress underneath the desk of a student who has a room on campus. I only go there to sleep and I spend the rest of my time just in the library or hanging out. And that's living on campus, but the living conditions of our students off campus, we need to start talking about that and hearing from, even just having those conversations with students, because these are the things. The challenge of poverty is a challenge that affects student success hugely. And then we look at the academic support, the area that we are familiar with. That's where we talk about tutoring and mentoring in this strategy. Induction and orientation, which goes beyond short couple of weeks in the first year. Our first year experience, which Sue is dealing with, and the notion of the extended curriculum and a notion of extended support, which ties in with this data that shows us that students need support beyond the first year. And in fact, with our tutorials, we are finding that it's not even clear that all first year students are in tutorials. They aren't. But very few second year students are in tutorials, and often there's a huge transitional phase between first year and second year. So that's what we want to see happening. Something that we really don't think about and do a lot in this institution is to talk about student voice. And we don't at the moment have the means of accessing student voice in very coherent ways. For example, in academic reviews, we have student voice because we have people who have been sent by departments. Often that is a limitation actually on the review process. So we want to find ways to talk to students, to find out what the level of student satisfaction is in this institution in various areas. Do they feel safe? Do they feel secure? Do they have access to learning materials? What's their online access like? What are the problems? And so on and so on and so on. What about the infrastructure in which they learn? Does it affect them when equipment doesn't work at the start of a lecture? And so those are the areas I'm talking about. So student feedback and evaluation is the other area. Course modules need to be evaluated for the sake of improvement. And we're trying to systematize this and encourage people to do this online, and this will go into the retention strategy, because it's about students being able to not have to be present in a lecture and fill out a piece of paper that we don't know goes where, but be able to sit wherever. wherever they are and do an online evaluation that might have a generic component across the institution. And that's the way we improve what's happening. And this set of the things I'm bringing up now relates to mental health, students' personal growth, and it's clear, the literature is very clear around these kinds of issues. The motivational level of students, their aspirations, their commitments, their intentions, their expectations, how do we grow these? Students don't all come in strongly motivated, strongly committed, with clear aspirations and clear goals, and that is proves to be that's something that we need to do. So it's around personal development as well as counseling. It's around career planning as well. You know, when we've asked students in the research a question now, for example, I'm trying to show you that there's a lack of intention. There's often a lack of intentionality with students. Why did you come to UWC? Because my parents or my friends, there's not a sense of this is where I wanted to be. It's very rare that students are saying because there's a program there that I want to study. And we asked them, why did you choose the program that we did? And predominantly the answer was, because my matric exams qualified me for it. The student had no sense of, is this what I want to do? Is this a good career move? Will I get a job in this area? And it's the way students make decisions about these things that we have to intervene in at various places. Coming to the side of teaching and learning, curriculum and assessment, this is things that we do very well, is the professional development and innovative practices of people who are standing in our classrooms. But we also want to strategize and frame access to learning materials. This is something that comes up constantly for students, and it's really again the challenge of poverty in many cases, where students do not buy textbooks, cannot buy course readers, don't have internet access to access learning materials. And how do we address that? They only use the internet while they are on campus. They have to leave early because they are commuting, and it's unsafe to leave after 5, whatever it is, because they have long journeys and dangerous journeys. And these are the things that we need to understand. Learning with technology, we need to strategize around how we again close the loop and not make the assumption that when we are using technology in learning and teaching, that success will follow. And that's what we need to think about. Formative assessment, I've put that in there because we often talk about students taking responsibility for their own learning. And in the research we have seen that students are really only enabled to take responsibility for their learning when they've been given some kind of feedback. Where you have gone wrong, what you need to do, how you need to act, behave in relation to this material or relation to the scholarly work. And so we cannot talk about students taking responsibility without talking about how we feed back to them what they actually need to be doing. A lot of students are first generational. They don't go home and sit around the dinner table and talk to their older siblings and their parents about what universities expect and what it means when my lecturer has said this and that, and what does it mean when I have to do an assessment of this nature. So we need to understand that. The teaching and learning infrastructure and resources, it's something again constantly, it's related to venues, venue allocation, sitting in the aisles, equipment that doesn't work. I mean, in the ECP review, we found that, you know, we expect people to be innovative, blended learning, multimodal, and then we stick them out there in those, what do they call those, opslanggebouwe, things at the back, where there is nothing. A chalkboard and seats. And this is the infrastructural stuff we have to think about. Our academic rules and policies, and we're starting to look at those much more clearly through SAP, through our regulatory committees. How do these rules and policies create burdens? For example, one we take for granted is what we call advanced standing or advanced placement, where a first year student or a second year student who has failed can move on and take 16 new credits or a full load of credits, still carrying other modules, and that often does not lead to success. In fact, the contrary, because we're already overburdening students who are already struggling. So we need to think how our rules enable or disable. And we talk about that quite a lot. Our framework will also prioritize a data analytics approach. We need to constantly be analyzing data of different kinds, cohort studies, module data, what's happening with our high impact modules, what's happening with our most frequently failed modules. They often don't appear as high impact modules, but there's that module, like English